Hey my friends, how are you today? My name is Misty Sims, and if you found me, you found my little corner of the internet that I like to call Beyond Reasonable Doubt, where we talk about all things true crime, culty, and even a little bit creepy. If you're new here, so glad you found me and clicked on that link to view this video, and I do hope that you'll stick around and hit that subscribe button and hang out with me long term. I love to talk about true crime over here and get you guys' opinions, so love to hear yours. And if you are a returning subscriber, you know I love you more than cupcakes with sprinkles, and I'm so excited that you are back. I hope you guys had a great Christmas. We definitely did. It was a great time to unplug and recharge a little bit. 2023 is coming to an end now, so that's going to be kind of a fun and refreshing start to 2024. Some people had a great 2023. Others I know had a trying 2023, but we're going to make 2024 the best we can. And that said, we are going to bring more and more cases to you, as many as we can. So I would love your ideas. So hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and then go down and email me at casesformisty@gmail.com and let me know some ideas of things that you want me to cover, because I would love to bring you the cases that you want to hear, and maybe it's things I don't know about and I can learn some new stuff along the way. I will remind you before we kick off today that I am just a lady on the internet with a camera, a mic, and too much to say. All the opinions in here are my own, based on research of readily available stuff on the internet that I've compiled into one source. So please do your own research and your own opinion. Be kind in the comments if you don't agree with something that I have said, or if you have found other information, link it below so that way I can go make myself smarter and we can all share our true crime knowledge here. This is a safe space to talk about that type of stuff, and we always want to show kindness here, because definitely the cases we cover are heavy. Family members have been affected. These were real people, so we want to be kind to each other and spread a little love in an atmosphere that definitely can be heavy at times. So with that said, let's dive right into today's case. Today's case takes place in Gulf Shores, Alabama, and involves a politician, a mistress, and a death that will leave us trying to answer the question, was it murder or was it suicide? If you aren't familiar with Gulf Shores, Alabama, it's known as the small town but big beach, and it's a beautiful area on the Gulf Coast of Alabama with sugar white sand and beautiful water. Gulf Shores is in Baldwin County, Alabama, and is about 28 square miles of land, and as of 2020 had a population of just over 15,000. There are about 11,000 vacation rentals and over 200 hotels, and Columbus actually stopped here for food and water on his route to Mexico. Pirates once hid all in the bayous that dot along the coast, and the Creek and the Seminole Indians scoured the area for what was known to contain a bounty of seafood, such as oysters. Before the Gulf Coast Intercoastal Waterway was completed in 1937, Gulf Shores was more of a wetland. But when the waterway opened, it was a more commercial space and was able to open up. Shrimping was huge in the area, and eventually would expand into deep sea fishing as well. So by 1939, Gulf Shores State Park would open, and then a post office would open in 1947. The town would incorporate in 1958, and this would lay the way for restaurants, hotels, and cottages to start booming by the 60s for tourists. But the fall and the winter months would obviously prove hard to the small town, and the tourist season would drastically slow down. In order to combat the down season, the town had to get creative, and they started their annual fishing rodeo and the National Shrimp Festival beginning in October of 1971. Now, this shrimp festival is still a huge deal today, and it draws in well over 200,000 people each year. And if you aren't into fishing or shrimp, there's the annual Hangout Festival that was established in 2009, and the first one was actually held in 2010. And it's a 3-day music festival that typically occurs on the third weekend of May, and it just really blasts you right into that rush of what's going to kick off tourist season. Now, Gulf Shores has had its, series of hard events as well, and it was hit very hard by Hurricane Frederick in 1979. This actually broke way for a lot of huge reconstruction with new condos, new restaurants, and new shops. So Gulf Shores would see tons and tons of damage and flooding from like hurricanes over the years, such as Ivan, Katrina, and Sally. But each time, the sweet little town pulled itself together and it rebuilt. And over the years, as fishing laws started to change and it kind of broke down the fishing industry, the real estate piece of the town really started to take over and cater more to rentals, resort getaways, homes that were popping up all over the place to rent out, and all these places that were being newly rebuilt after these major storms. So this really created new and crazy opportunities for up-and-coming realtors. Well, Angel Downs, the person of interest in our story, was one of those realtors that saw great success in Gulf Shores. She was born Angel Catherine Hinckley on December 21st, 1964, in Missouri to her parents John and Thelma, and she had one brother and three sisters. Her father was in the Air Force, and they quickly moved from Missouri to Warner Robins, Georgia, and with her dad's work. And then, unfortunately for the family, at 18 months old, Angel was diagnosed with a heart issue that she dealt with throughout her life, and she also was waiting on a heart transplant list until they did find some medication that became available to her as an adult in her 30s that would help control her issue. And even though it was controlled, it did have lasting impacts in her life, one of the biggest being that she was never able to bear her own children. But Angel didn't let that get her down. She was described as a sweet and beautiful soul that just loved life. Her friends actually nicknamed her Barbie because of her beauty, but outside of just being a pretty face, she was a really smart cookie. Made great grades. She was described as non-judgmental, great friend, sister, daughter, and absolutely loved the beach. You could find her there every single weekend. She would go exercise there, just loved it. And in 2001, she would marry her boyfriend, Chris Downs, and they moved to Gulf Shores, Alabama. And in 2005, sadly, they would divorce, but they did remain friends. But there was potentially a reason behind their split. You see, Angel had met local politician Steven Nodine at the Floribama during the mullet toss in 2004. Now, this is an annual beach party and the Floribama is like a landmark around here, okay? The mullet is a local fish, and it's quite plentiful in the Gulf Coast, and it is the only fish, I believe, in existence that has a gizzard, which, if you don't know what that is, typically it's found in like birds and chickens, and it helps them to grind up and digest plant material. So this is pretty unique for a fish. But anyway, so mullet tossing the mullet toss is a huge party, and it consists of individuals getting together on the beach, and they're going to throw these dead fish across state lines. So they're in like a big 10-foot circle, and they see who can throw it the farthest. And if I understand it correctly, they alternate each year if they're throwing into Alabama or Florida. Right now, I think their record is 189 feet, but don't quote me on that. Look that one up for yourself. And the fish are not all to bad use. They are fed to local alligators in Alligator Alley or donated to the Gulf Coast Zoo. And the funds that are made from this mullet toss are used for local youth charities every year. So while it has to sound weird to you guys, but it actually does do a little bit of good. And each year they raise around $40,000 for youth charities that they donate across both state lines. So weird time, good cause. Anyway, it's where Angel and Steven meet up. But both are married, and although Angel is soon going to get a divorce from Chris, Steven gave her a story about his marriage was having trouble. And it doesn't really sound like this would be the same account that his wife Kimberly would have given, but I mean, let's be honest, every time we tell the story of married people doing things married people ought not to be doing, their story is the marriage is in trouble, right? But be that truthful, or be it they just baked, homemade chocolate chip cookies while petting their golden retriever in front of a fireplace wearing matching family pajamas, it's the same story either way, right? Always, 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 always. So, that said, who is Steven Nodine? So Steven was born Steven Daniel Nodine on July the 9th, 1963 in Juno Beach, Florida, to his single mom. He did not have a great upbringing as far as just lavishly. He grew up on welfare and food stamps, and the family would see a great amount of tragedy when his little sister Patty was killed while riding her bike after being struck by a vehicle while she and her brother were coming home from a Labor Day celebration in 1976. So definitely not as fun of an upbringing as we would hope for a little child. But Steven went on to move to Mobile, Alabama. He married his wife Kimberly in 2001. The couple had one child, a son that they named Christopher. And by all accounts, Steven was a great dad, and he loved Christopher very, very much. But he had always had this interest in running for politics, running for office. Especially, he was just glued to the TV during the Watergate scandal and was very impressed by how Gerald Ford handled the situation. So if you're not familiar with Watergate, definitely look that up if you're not from the States. But he went on to have a few jobs in like sales, radio. He worked for the West Palm Beach JCs, and that just didn't stick. He finally was able to begin that career in politics that he always wanted when he was elected to the Mobile City Council in September of 2001. And by April of 2004, he's already running for county commissioner of Mobile. So it was during this time that the current commissioner got convicted on some federal charges, and Steven was actually the one that they went and appointed to fill that seat until the term ended. So he accepted. He had to resign from his position in city council. He took over the commissioner's seat where he sat from July of 2004 until November of 2004 when he was officially elected to the Mobile County Commission's second seat. And he would go on and be reelected in 2008. So he's really getting his political career off and running. He's feeling great about himself because he's starting to rub elbows with some pretty high up folks, including the former President Bush at the time. And he was just described as like a rising star in the political community. You know, Steven was just very polite. He was a nice individual. Angel's friends actually didn't paint that same picture of him. They saw him a little more like loud, attention seeking, kind of like a look at me kind of guy, life of the party. But that is also very characteristic to me of what a politician might be. Just could be interpreted kind of differently by different people. Anyway, when Steven and Angel met, they are just instantly attracted to each other, and they start up an affair in April of 2004. Now, Steven, he never hid the fact that really hid his affair, but his wife said that she thought that Angel and he were just friends, even though he was spending like every weekend with Angel, and she even had a room set up for his son. So, you know, maybe Kimberly was just saying she thought they were good friends to keep like a good political front for Steven, or maybe she really was in denial. But it really sounds like a full-fledged relationship more than just like a little bitty, you know, one-night stand kind of affair, right? And he said openly, Steven did, in interviews with sources like 48 Hours, that he wasn't trying to hide the affair. Like, they were getting photographed together, going to different events, and it was being published in the press. They're living it up. He wanted her to be more than just a mistress, which Angel always assumed he was going to divorce his wife, Kimberly, just as she had divorced her husband. But we see that just actually never happens. So fast forward to October 31st of 2006, and sadly the police get a call to Angel's home off of Fort Morgan Road saying that Angel has been found unresponsive and had attempted to unalive herself by taking too many pills. And her sister said that Angel was going through a bad patch in her life because she had been like just kind of after Steven about divorcing Kimberly. And why was he still waiting around, you know, to do so when like they were well into their relationship and, you know, thought things were moving forward. And he admits that he has not filed. He hadn't really talked about it, anything like that. And while it's never been corroborated, everybody seems to draw the conclusion that may have played a large part into Angel's depression because she just loved him so deeply, and she had left her husband to pursue a relationship and a life with Steven. So in another interview that he would give in the aftermath, you know, he was questioned why he didn't leave, and he was just very blunt. And Steven said that he wanted to have it all. He wanted his family to come home to in Mobile. He wanted to escape to the beach with Angel when he wanted to. You know, it's just heartbreaking to think that he was just that cruel to both women over the course of 6 years. This went on for 6 years. You know, and maybe it's never been said, I don't think, that I could find, but maybe Steven and Kimberly had an arrangement, maybe some kind of open marriage, which I almost have to believe, since she was letting him take their son to Gulf Shores with him to see this woman. But it's very clear that regardless of what their arrangement was, this was not okay with Angel, and she wanted their relationship to move forward, just the two of them. So on May 8th, 2010, Angel went to a concert in Orange Beach with her friends, then out to a bar. She made plans the next day to go out with her friends on a boating excursion. And she ended up canceling these plans saying she was sick. But the truth of the matter was she just wanted to hang out with Steven and spend time with him on Sunday. You wonder why she felt the need to lie. But it sounds like her friends knew about Steven. But I have to assume, it's because they weren't fond of him, since they described him quite differently in the earlier description in the light of things. This Sunday was also peculiar to me because it was Mother's Day, and you would think he would be with his wife, child's mother, outside of his mistress, but maybe it was a difficult day for Angel as well, so I don't know, but he's there. They went to the beach. Sounds like they had a normal day. They took some pictures together. It seemed like everybody's having a good time. Everybody's happy. According to Steven's account of the situation, he drove Angel home after they spent the day together, and she's quite upset and is commenting about him going home to his wife. He said it was really nothing new, and he just told her he loved her, and then he got ready to leave. Well, he realized when he got a little ways down the road that he forgot his wallet, so he came back, ran inside, retrieved it, said he never saw her or heard anything, and he left. Right after this, a neighbor's claim, which is a little different than Steven's, neighbor Roger Whitehead said that he heard a shot come from the direction of where Angel lived, and he saw Steven's red truck leaving the residence. And he recognized it because it was there so often, and he was a fireman, so he recognized the county from the tags. He had been trained to, notice things like that, and he saw the Steven's tag. Angel Downs, sadly, would be found dead from a gunshot wound in her driveway at the age of 45 by her neighbors. She was lying face up, and next to her right hand was a Caltech 9mm. The bullet had went through her right temple and killed her almost instantly. Medical examiner also found that she had a blood alcohol level of 0.99, which is definitely above the legal limit, and she had a mix of Adderall, Xanax, and Ambien in her system. Now, keep this in mind. Police found her BlackBerry, and they took it into evidence to examine, who she'd been conversing with, who she'd been texting with, calling, whatever. But the phone was never investigated properly at this time. It just sat in evidence, okay? So put that one away for later. The medical examiner, Eugene Hart, performed the autopsy and found that the shot was consistent with that of suicide, but he also found a little bit of a wound from blunt force trauma to her right hand, particularly her thumb and her right middle finger. Her body was sent back to him for a second time a few days later, so that he could check fingernail clippings and then the back of her head as well. And he testified that he had never been asked to look at a body like this twice before, so a little unusual to him. But he testified that he was going to list the manner of her death as unaliving herself due to 3 factors. The first was the shot wound, the second was the position of the weapon in relation to her body, and the third were her prior attempts to end her own life. He would later change that decision to undetermined after a meeting with the DA, and would testify that law enforcement believed it was a homicide, but he could not find evidence to prove that it was undoubtedly homicide. So, a little hinky there to me, but anyway. Steven was called by police and said that he needed to come down to the station, and of course, he called his lawyer, and he had heard that a woman on Fort Morgan Road had been killed and that she was a blonde, and he said that he just had this sinking feeling that he knew who it was, and now the police are calling him, and whatnot. So he goes down to the station and he tells the police about the evening that he left Angel's house, and that second time that he left after retrieving his wallet. He made a stop at a nearby gas station, and that was later confirmed with surveillance tapes. And then he said he tried to go golfing, which I found odd being that late at night, but the golf course was closed, so he decided just to try to grab some food. And before he went into the restaurant, he changed his clothes because, according to Steven, he was still wearing his swimming trunks from where they'd been at the beach all day. He ate, he drank some coffee and water, no other alcohol at that time, which all was confirmed by surveillance tapes. And while all this was corroborated, Steven just really isn't sitting pretty overall. And the reason being, a few days later on May 14th, he would be charged with an ethics violation, possession of a controlled substance, misdemeanor possession of Mary J. and paraphernalia, and would have to again turn himself over to police, not just going down to the station to be questioned, but actually turning himself in. Now, these charges were pretty old. They were back from December of 2019, where he had dropped off his county vehicle for maintenance, and that was where a small amount of the Mary J was found inside. They didn't arrest him for it back then, and he claimed it wasn't his. Truck wasn't in his possession when they found it, so why now? And of course I wonder that too, what took you so long, but whatever. But it was also found that he had gained over 2,000 Loratab pills from various places between 2009 and 2010. So in the indictment for the ethics charges, it stated that he had used the county truck for personal use. He was, using the county issued credit card for gas for these personal gallivantings. And he admitted to driving the truck while drinking on the day of Angel's death. Also listed were issues of him losing his truck at Mardi Gras for 6 days, showing up to the BP oil spill incident, which was a few months prior, and being so drunk that he was asked to leave while he was in a professional setting. Other incidents for the ethics charge in the indictment included claims that he had been physically abusive to Angel, once in New Orleans and then once in Baldwin County. But again, after these happened, he was arrested well after. And it seems everyone looked the other way until she was found dead. So who knows? But regardless, he's been taken in now, and it does sound like he's been acting, a fool out there, running around smoking, drinking, pilling, adultering, all these things. And while, maybe that's just all fun, he's in a professional environment and professional representative, so can't do that. In the meantime, Angel's funeral was held on May 15th, 2010 at the McCullough Funeral Home, and she was cremated and her ashes provided to her family. Almost 2 weeks later, Steven would be formally indicted on May 24th for her murder. And this was pretty quick. And his attorney stated on an interview with 48 Hours that he believed that the DA wanted a high-profile case and some attention due to an election coming up. So, little conspiracy there. And of note, DA Judy Newcomb denied this all the way around. Steven was arrested. He bonded out on $500,000 bond and was put on house arrest. And along with these charges, he was facing perjury, harassment. So it's just mounting up on Steven. The perjury charge was due to him claiming that he couldn't afford an attorney. And then the harassment charges were due to his alleged stalking of Angel. Now, the stalking claims came from a statement from her family, but there was no proof outside of the family's claims against Steven. So on May 27th, he was indicted in federal court for the unlawful drug use, possession of firearms. He resigned from the commission that same day. And then on October 28th, he pled guilty to the federal charges of being an unlawful drug user and the firearms charge. His sentencing is going to occur the following April, and his trial for the ethics, harassment, perjury, and unaliving began on December 6, 2010 in Baldwin County. And the prosecutors felt that he had taken Angel's life and staged her unaliving herself. The Judy Newcomb said that it was just not natural what the placement of the weapon was to her head, which was in direct conflict with what the medical examiner was saying. And the staging of the incident also seemed to be in conflict with what the neighbor was saying. So, he said he saw Steven leaving the scene. The time didn't seem to allow for staging. They insisted that he stalked her and he abused her, even though they didn't have any direct evidence of it. And they even went so far as they hired an outside medical examiner to review Dr. Hart's findings. So Dr. James Downs, no relation, looked into the records, and he concluded that she was a victim of the crime of murder. The DA claimed that Angel's hair would not fan out the way that it had been found, and she tried to prove this by falling backwards in the courtroom, which didn't work because her hair fell pretty much the same way, so it was kind of a bust theatrically, but she tried. Um, the defense, they're like, we're standing by the claim that this was an incident that was by Angel's own hand, and the weapon was proved to be her own weapon. There was zero blood found on Steven, on his clothes, his person, his truck. The jury, they deliberated for 6 hours, and on December 20th, 2010, they found Steven Nodine guilty of the ethics charge, but could not reach a consensus on the murder or the harassment charges. So a mistrial was declared for those two. In April 2011, he was sentenced to the 15 months in federal prison and 3 years of federal supervision on those drug and firearms charges. And then he would be sentenced in October for the ethics charge. Now, Judy Newcomb, who we've been speaking about, was not reelected as DA, but was replaced by a new person named Hallie Dixon, and she declined to prosecute the case. She recognized that the public felt that Steven was guilty as homemade sin, but she relied on the findings of her colleagues. She did, however, order a new grand jury hearing, and they did not indict for murder, but rather for criminally negligent homicide. Sort of meaning that he didn't do it, but he drove her to do it, if that makes sense. So DA Dixon still declined to file that charge, telling 48 Hours that there was just no way that Steven could have staged the scene and then driven away with zero blood evidence. And that does sound concerning. But Angel's family were still distraught, and they were very upset with DA Dixon's finding, and they appealed to the state, asking for a special prosecutor. And they won, and they won this appeal. And the new prosecutor, David Whetstone, was from the Alabama Attorney General's office. He reviewed all the previous records, and he discovered, a lot about Judy Newcomb as he dug deeper, including that they never had that BlackBerry looked at. It was just sitting in evidence. So he sent it off to the lab to be evaluated, and it was very obvious that Steven was not stalking her. Text exchanges between he and Angel were quite normal. Angel initiated most of them, and Judy Newcomb had withheld not only not looking at this BlackBerry, but also a photograph that was shown the injury to Angel's right hand was pre-existing before the crime took place. It was easily seen in a photograph earlier that day on the beach that her hand was already injured. So David Whetstone and the defense actually found that Judy Newcomb was using really aggressive techniques to have Dr. Hart change his ruling on her cause of death or manner of death. The defense sat down with Dr. James Downs to discuss his opinion, and Dr. Downs said that based on his conclusion of homicide was on 7 different factors, and they were Angel's hair appeared to be staged. There were no fingerprints on the weapon. Apparently multiple people had handled this weapon and wiped it clean. Like what sense that made, I don't know, but that's where they were. There were scratches on the back of a button on her skirt and potential scratches on her back to make it seem that she'd been dragged. But all the blood spatter evidence would show that she had not been dragged. Dr. Downs claimed that there was a split in the seam of her shirt, and later would be proven that that was just kind of normal wear and tear for a shirt. There was a scratch on her hand, which he felt showed a struggle, but, again, back to proof in the photograph that was from earlier in the day. And then the fact that it was in her own driveway. So he didn't think that she was, dragged there, nor did he think she would commit this crime in her own driveway. So after meeting, the defense filed a motion for the dismissal to the prosecutorial misconduct, and the defense gave their own evidence to prove that the unaliving, which was concurred with by the fluid stain on the driveway underneath her, that she had not been moved. And every expert that looked at this evidence said that Angel had to have done this by her own hand, with the exception of Dr. Downs, who later said that there was no way to prove who did this crime beyond a reasonable doubt. And of course, the defense also had the text messages showing very normal activity between Angel and Steven, like Angel's asking him what he wants for dinner, things like that. And Prosecutor Whetstone didn't want to completely dismiss the charges, so he went to Steven with a plea deal. And that was to plead no contest to harassment and perjury, with an exchange for the prosecution dropping the murder charge. So on May 12, 2011, he pled guilty to a misdemeanor drug charge and was given 1 year suspended sentence and 2 years probation. He later admitted to using Mary J for his hip pain, but did say that he was addicted to those Lortabs that he was getting. On October 24th, 2012, he was sentenced 2 years in jail for the perjury charges, and for the harassment and ethics charges, he was sentenced to 1 year concurrent sentences and was allowed a work release job while serving his time. And this job was working for his attorney as an office manager. This wouldn't last though, because Steven found himself at a golf course instead of work. So, I guess it wasn't closed this time. So he got that round of golf in. He did serve his time, and on October 13th, 2014, he was released from jail and was put on 3 years probation. But Stevie couldn't quite just keep it between the lines there. November of 2015, he tested positive for opiates and Mary J. Then in December 2015, he overstayed his time restriction in New Orleans. He had permission to be there for a job interview, which was fine, but he had agreed to return that same day. And instead of doing that, he decided to take in a Saints game. So he was arrested on December 11th, 2015. He again tested positive for Mary J and opiates and was given 60 days in jail for these violations. So he's doing a lot. But he still has aspirations to run for Congress as a libertarian. So I look for Stevie's name out there one day. He says he wants to diversify local economy and said you never get a perfect person. When asked about his status as being a felon, he said that his skeletons are just out in the open instead of people wondering what kind of person he was. Not sure we still know all your skeletons though, Steve-O, because in 2017, a woman from Atmore, Alabama, filed for an order of protection against Steven, saying that he had stalked her and had committed DV against her. It was dropped in 2018 without any real explanation being given. Steven may have shown some signs of this behavior in his past, as it was alleged that in 1987 in Palm Beach County, the police received a call from a neighbor of Steven's, and when they arrived, his ex-girlfriend said that he had cut her porch screen and waited inside for her to get home and then struck her on the legs. However, she did not press charges. So, Angel's sister Susan gave an interview to 48 Hours saying that she did not believe that her sister took her own life. She said that, Angel had dinner plans that evening. She had appointments the following week. Of course she had some drugs in her system and she was drunk. So maybe she wasn't thinking clearly, but her sister said that she thought Angel was entirely too vain and said that she wouldn't want anyone to find her like that, which, does make sense, especially with her past attempts. They weren't of this manner, so I don't know. But she did say that Angel called her and asked if someone was breaking into your home, where would you need to shoot them? Susan asked if that was Steven. Angel replied no, and she told Angel to text her the name if she couldn't say it, and she did receive a text from Angel with the name Steven. But she never filed any kind of charges or anything against him. So Angel's friends said that she had told them that he did abuse her, and if they ever found her dead, he did it. But again, no charges, no DV was ever proven. She was desperate for him to leave his wife. We do know that. And we know that it wasn't like she was going to expose their relationship to Kimberly because it was very open. It was out there in the open. So what reason did he have to do her in either? We don't know. Kimberly did finally divorce him once he was incarcerated, so there's thankfully for that, but it's just hard to say. The initial DA just corrupted this case with her own agenda, I feel like, and it made it messier. But the fact is that the world lost what sounds like a wonderful, beautiful woman. I will have to say she had some bad choice in men, because it sounds like he's a colossal turd for his behavior, wanting to have his cake and eat it too. But at the end of the day, no one needed to or deserved to be taken over this by their own hand or someone else's. Breaks my heart for her family and her. So what do I think? I don't know. This one's hard. For me, hands down, I would think I would be cut and dry of it potentially being a homicide. But with the no blood evidence, that one makes it very hard. But I do think that if she was driven to do this by her own hand, that it does seem very peculiar. Most studies and things that you will find do say that women don't tend to like to leave it messy in any way. And so that does stand out to me. And being out in your driveway and out in public like that is a hard thing to swallow for me. Another thing that's hard for me to swallow though is if she was getting ready to do this, she has grabbed a weapon from her home. Did he not notice this? Because I mean, here's what I'm thinking: if she was by her own hand, she's running out after him. She's screaming, she's screaming, she's hollering, you gotta leave or you gotta leave, something. I mean, I feel like if you've been pushed to the point where you're about to do something very rash, you most likely are vocalizing it at that point. I would think to the person leaving the home. Neighbor said he saw him leaving the home right around the same time that he heard the sound. So what kind of, I said you were a dart earlier. I mean, what kind of dart are you that you just left? You just left her there 6 years of your life. Even if it's not a relationship you should have been in, you were in. So this one's got me. What do y'all think? I would love to hear it in the comments. My heart, again, goes out to her family. It ain't worth it. It ain't worth it. Nobody's worth in any of this kind of mess. Well, if we can figure it out somehow, but it's definitely not worth this. And the world definitely lost what sounds like a great friend, daughter, sister, all the things. So that's it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for being here. Again, I hope you had a great holiday season, and we're rolling into the new year, and 2024 is definitely going to be your year. So cannot wait to bring you more true crime all the time. Send me your case ideas at casesformisty@gmail.com. It's always in the description down below. And until then, I will see you next time. Bye, my lovelies. Bye.